Hi, this is George coming to you live from Nautilus Mission Control at the University of Rhode Island's Inner Space Center. And we are joined today by NASA astronaut and Nautilus Navigator Cady Coleman. Cady has logged over 4,330 hours in space on 2 space shuttle missions and the International Space Station. She's a retired U.S. Air Force officer and holds degrees in chemistry from MIT and polymer science and engineering from UMass Amherst. Cady is serving as a navigator aboard Nautilus, which is in the Mediterranean Sea, exploring the Eratosthenes seamount just south of Cyprus. If you'd like to stick with the action on the ship, you can do so by switching over to Channel 2 or the Quad. However, right here on Channel 1, Cady will be answering your questions live for the next 20 minutes. You can submit a question by clicking on the Participate tab to the right-hand side of this video. Be sure to include your name and where you're from so Cady knows who she's talking to. All right, so there also will be a 3 to 4 second delay between my question and her answer. That's just because Nautilus is so far away. Cady, let's dive right in, no pun intended. How long have you been on Nautilus, and what's it been like so far?
You know, it's hard for me to tell how many days, but I think it's about 4. I think it might be Tuesday. We'll see. No, I guess it's Wednesday. Because it's just pretty busy here on ship, and life seems to go away. I'll tell you, it's really exciting. This is a really neat thing to be a part of and to feel like, you know, you have a job to do, which I do, in helping to be the interface between the folks that are actually driving the remotely operated vehicles. So there they are on the bottom, close to the bottom, but they're towed by the ship, and so they're depending on me as the navigator to help make sure the ship is in the right position for them. So it's really exciting to have that kind of job, to be out here in the middle. It seems like the middle of nowhere, but as soon as you go into the control room, you are on the top of Eratosthenes seamount, which means a mountain right under us in the ocean, a mountain in the middle of the ocean.
And we've been getting some great footage of that. Let's chat a bit about your career. You've flown on 2 space shuttle missions. What was your role?
I had different roles on each one. The first mission was a 16-day experiment flight. So that meant that we were basically rehearsing experiments for the space station, trying to figure out how do we do them? How do we get the data, you know, up and down from the space shuttle to the scientists whose experiments they really are? Similar to the kinds of things you do here on the Nautilus, where you have that same kind of, you know, doctors on-call philosophy, where when you find something exciting on the seafloor, you can call an expert in that anywhere in the world. So I did that for my first mission, a 16-day experiment mission. And the second mission, very different and exciting in a different way. We deployed the Chandra X-ray Observatory. It's an X-ray telescope that looks at black holes and exploding stars that are called supernovas. And we helped deploy that, meaning take it from the space shuttle, send it off on its way 80,000 kilometers outside the Earth's, going around the Earth. And it's still taking data as we speak. So it's exciting to have been a part of that.
Cady, you're a chemist by training. What kinds of chemistry do we do up in space, if any?
Well, we do lots of different chemistry, as well as physics and medicine and all sorts of different kinds of experiments. And, you know, here's the tricky part. You know, I'm a chemist, and yet when we're doing physics, which I will tell you was not my favorite, you know, does that mean physics wasn't for me? No, it just meant that I had to take a little longer to make sure I really understood what we were doing and that I was making the right experiments happen. And so, you know, if you're finding that you think maybe math and science isn't your thing, you know, for the kids that are out there, first of all, I think math and science is actually for everyone. And second, it might be that you just need to take a few more different explanations to make it your thing, because math and science are out there. So we did a lot of different kinds of experiments. Some of them were chemistry, but the rest of them, I just had to do my best. And that's what it's all about here on the Nautilus, too.
Great, we've got our first question coming in. It's from Hannah. She wants to know, what's it like to be in zero gravity?
I tell people it's delightful. I feel like Peter Pan, you know, with fairy dust, where suddenly you're flying. And I will tell you that the first time that I felt like that, now that I've been back on Earth, you know, I spent 6 months living on the International Space Station. So I was flying for, you know, for months and months and months the whole time. First time I felt like I was flying again was when I'm sitting in the control room looking at one of the screens of what we are seeing with the Hercules camera and as we are flying along the seafloor. So it's that same feeling of navigating our world where we are flying through the world and exploring.
And you've also spent some time in some pretty extreme environments here on Earth. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
The reason we do that as astronauts is to literally practice being on the space station before we get there. So I spent 2.5 months in Antarctica, 6 weeks of that in a tent, you know, with 3 other people, 4 of us total, collecting meteorites. And it's a, you know, extreme environment. Safety is really important, and the mission is more important than whether you like each other, whether you like the food, and whether you'd rather be home or not. And it can be like that on a space station. It can be like that on a research expedition, like being on the Nautilus, and they're all good ways for us to practice being up in space. I also got to be in a habitat underwater off the coast of Florida. I lived for 11 days underwater, and I tell you, I loved that. It was almost better than space, because in space, I haven't actually seen any other folks out there, but underwater, there are a lot of neighbors, and it's exciting to watch.
Well, that is a ringing endorsement for Nautilus. We've got a question coming in from Sunny in North Carolina. She asks, are there any similarities between being a navigator aboard Nautilus and being an astronaut? And if so, what are they?
There are a lot of similarities in a general sense. One of them is that for the most part, you know, as long as you've done your basic math in high school and college, then you can do the navigator job. And I find I'm using that math on a daily basis here on the Nautilus. And it's not, you know, it's not so hard most of the time, but sometimes things happen really quickly. We suddenly see something underwater. We want to record its position right now. We want the ship to stop and maybe to turn around and come back to that exciting discovery. It's up to me to coordinate those things. And that's kind of similar to being up in space, where a lot of times it's not that hard. A lot of the things I trained for, I learned to make sure I knew when I would go up to space. You know, what if we have a fire? What if there's a hole in the space station? You know, what if something happens where I have to react quickly? Most of the time you're not going to use that, but when you need it, you need to be ready. And I would say that's true of every explorer on this vessel, is that basically they've collected the skills that they need so that they're ready with them when they need them here on the Nautilus or wherever they are in life.
We've got a question coming in from Sarah from San Antonio, Texas. She asked, what's the most memorable thing you've seen on all of your explorations?
You know, that is such a hard question, Sarah. You know, memorable is going to be just looking at the whole Earth, and that's from the space station, from our cupola windows up there, and looking down and realizing that, you know, we all live here, and it's our special place to take care of, and our special place that we don't know that much about. From space, you really see how much of the Earth is made up of the ocean, and how, you know, there's a whole world under that surface that we don't know a lot about. So I'm pretty excited to be here on the Nautilus, getting to fill in a little bit of that square for planet Earth.
Cady, you are a musician, and the reason that we know that is because you have played your flute from space on numerous occasions, including once with Jethro Tull's Ian Anderson. Tell us about that experience.
Well, first of all, I'll tell you, I was nervous. And, you know, part of being an astronaut, being somebody who's got a job where when the time is right, you have to do the right thing. You have to perform, so to speak. You're either performing your job or maybe you're performing as a flute player. I'm an amateur flute player. It was marvelous to play with him. He's a really interesting guy who loves the space program as well as music. And you'll find in the NASA Exploration Corps as well as in the Nautilus Exploration Corps, there's a lot of musicians where it's just you know, being people, music is just a part of us, just like exploration's a part of us. On our team up there in the control room alone, I think we have 5 musicians out of, I think, about 8.
And we have the logical follow-up question from Sierra in Virginia. She asks, hi, Cady, from a fellow flautist, or flutist, I don't know how to pronounce that properly. Did you bring your flute to play with you on Nautilus?
Well, I did, and I haven't gotten the chance to play much lately. I brought my flute as well as a tin whistle, you know, a little Irish whistle, partly because I do have some playing to do when I get home and I need to practice, and partly in the hopes that I would find some fellow musicians, just folks that love music and wouldn't mind playing with an amateur to play with. And we've been a little bit too busy so far. Rachel's had her guitar out, and I'm looking forward to playing with her, and then we found out there's some other musicians on our shift, so I think it might be a nice time tonight on the deck of the Nautilus.
Well, I think all of our viewers are expecting an impromptu quartet, so we'll wait for that from you. In the meantime, I've got a question from Justin in Rhode Island. Justin asks, how do you become an astronaut and what do you need to study?
Well, Justin, I don't know if you're going to like this answer. You become an astronaut by being ready for the opportunity and by filling out an application. And I'm not trying to belittle your question by saying, well, fill out an application. I'm trying to emphasize how important it is for everybody, whether they are 10 years old or 70 years old, to realize that they need to be ready for opportunity and that it's not just going to find them. And most of us end up having to apply for things, having to actually fill out an application, and on that piece of paper or that computer, you have to find a way to tell the people who are going to read those who you are and why they might like to have you on their team. And that means you really need to have practiced your writing to be really effective with your writing, to make sure that you communicate that in a short number of words to really communicate what you do. And you have to have thought about, what do they need to know about me, and what do they need on this team, and do I have it or do I need to go and find it?
Cady, I've got a follow-up for you about that. It sounds like science communication and science outreach is important to you, and I know that's part of the mission of Nautilus. What has that experience been like, being in the control van on SPL with the whole World Wide Web listening to you live?
You know, I have to tell you that I try not to think about the whole wide world listening part. And in some ways, it becomes easy because we have such an important job to do. I mean, nobody has been here to this place on the top of the mountain under the seafloor, Eratosthenes, where we are. Nobody's been there before. We're exploring it. And when you see something and you're trying to help direct, you know, Hercules to get a picture of that, and the videographer and the Hercules pilot are working together, you forget all about the fact that people are listening, and you just say what you need to say. And, you know, if you need to tell people you made a mistake and they have to come back, or you've done this but you're not sure if it's the right thing, you just have to do your best and hope that everybody who's listening realizes that we're all just doing our best and we're in a special place with a special opportunity.
We've got a question from Jessica in New York. Jessica asks, what kinds of things have you discovered on Nautilus so far?
There's tons of things, and I can't even, sort of as a guest navigator who just came on board, busy learning their job, tell you about all of them. But I'll tell you what we're looking at Eratosthenes is that, you know, this is basically kind of like a cupcake on the floor of the ocean, okay? But it's pretty special in that there's a lot of things going on under the cupcake, and the cupcake is actually being pushed from Africa up into the island of Cyprus. And as that is happening, there's high pressure gases trying to come up through the cupcake. And there's going to be layers in that cupcake. We know that through our knowledge of geology and geography. There's going to be layers that don't let those gases up, and they're going to come out the sides. And what we're hoping to do today, and I would actually say pretty soon on our shift, so we're pretty excited, is that we think those gases come out the sides of the cupcake, and they actually provide a source of life, of new life, that doesn't take place using light, but takes place using chemistry. And the Nautilus was already here last year, and they saw on the side of the mountain or the side of the cupcake, they saw some of these signs of life in the form of wild plants and small animals that they didn't expect to be there. And we're going to go back to those places, visit them again, and see what else there is to explore. We only looked at some places. We're going to look at some more today and throughout the next 10 days.
That's a whole separate food chain from photosynthesis, so that's very cool, and we'll be looking out for that. Tell me, you've also served as Chief of Robotics for the Astronaut Office. What are some of the similarities and differences between the robots that we send into space and the robots that we send thousands of meters under the sea?
Well, part of it is our ability to repair them. And they're more difficult to repair up in space just because it's a little less accessible, even though certainly down on the seafloor is not accessible either. But because Hercules and Argos are on a tether and can be actually brought back up on the ship and resupplied and also rebuilt if something breaks or doesn't work right, they can be a little more robust with them. They can, afford to kind of, they certainly never want to run into things, but in space we're a little more careful. We have to be more careful, and yet at the same time they don't want to beat up Hercules and Argos either. So we always make sure that, like, when we're reaching out for something, we have another view, either up or over, to know how far is it to this thing right here. And we have to have a camera view that lets us know we're getting closer, closer, closer. So we have those things in common, and actually just trying to sort of be the robot, be the machine. It's really fun for me to watch the Hercules and Argos pilots flying.
We've got a question coming in from Pat in Chicago. Pat asks, what's better, Nautilus food or space food?
Nautilus food is better. I don't even have to think about it. And I apologize to all of the really nice space science people who try to do their best to give us food up in space. And I'll tell you, our space food's not bad. There's a lot of preservatives, a lot of dried food. It's a little more trouble to eat, everything on your plate, every single thing at dinner. If you were in space, you'd have to open a package, add water, or heat it up or something. And so every little pile of food was another package, another piece of trash. Sometimes it's just a lot of trouble to eat up in space. The menu repeats every 9 days. Can be a little boring, but you know what? It's an amazing place up there. Nobody goes for the food. People might actually come to Nautilus for the food because it is amazing food here.
And I've got a potentially unpleasant follow-up question for you. Are you seasick at all on Nautilus, and were you seasick going into space?
Well, those are great questions. I don't in general get, airsick, but I do actually, now that I'm adult, somehow get seasick. Very disappointing to me because I love the sea. So, I came prepared with medicine. I mean, I'm a chemist, better living through chemistry, and I like to be prepared. I had a job to do, and I really want to enjoy the sea experience, so I brought some, preventative medicines with me. But the Nautilus is a pretty big ship, and I've been lucky so far, and I think now I'm pretty used to it, so I'll continue to be lucky, so I haven't needed any of my medicine. As for space, I would say more than half of us are sick when we're up in space. And so on my first mission, not sick. On my second mission, sick, partly because we deployed that telescope really quickly, didn't have much time. And up on the space station, never even sick, not even a little bit, until I got home. And it mostly has to do with your vestibular system and how your head feels, and that is pretty disoriented when you get home. So then that medicine comes really in handy.
Tell us a little bit about the difference between the longer ISS missions and the sort of shorter space shuttle missions. What's the mentality difference there?
Well, I was told that the space shuttle missions are kind of like a sprint, and then a long 6-month mission on a space station is more like a marathon. But I will tell you, I felt like I sprinted for about 6 months. I mean, it's really a long time, and at the same time, you have to pace yourself. You have to sleep. So you're going to be there a little bit for the long haul. You have to learn to take care of yourself, and it's one of the reasons why somebody like me comes on a mission like the Nautilus, because even though I'm only here for 2 weeks, I'm still going to learn something about my ability to cope with an environment that I don't really control, to be part of a team that I don't get to pick, and our mission is more important than whether I like them or not. My job is to get the most out of myself, the most out of everybody on my team, figure out what everybody does better than I do, use that, get them to help me when I need help, and help them when they need help, whether we all know how to ask for it or not. There's a lot of parallels from, long space mission and long Nautilus mission, or even short Nautilus mission. So there's a lot of things to learn.
So would you characterize your time on Nautilus as a sprint or as a marathon?
Well, so far, I feel like we've been sprinting. I mean, it's not that they are slave drivers here. It is just that, you know, the mission is compelling. You know, we have only so much time on the seafloor with these ROVs, and everybody wants to get the most out of it. And so if something happens such that we need to bring the ROVs up and make a quick fix, everybody wants to get them back in the water again, back exploring again. And if it means you have to stay up a little bit longer and, you know, maybe piece your sleep around a little bit, you know, we're still going to make sure we get our sleep because we need that to be safe, but it might not be in the way we're the way we're the most comfortable. So it's been pretty busy, but it's because I think everybody here is pretty passionate about the exciting work that we're doing.
Cady, one last question for you. Why do you explore?
I think people just can't help it. I know that, you know, I keep thinking maybe I'll retire and be at home and not leave and not go anywhere, but then, you know, finding out what's happened on Earth and being part of the solution to some of the problems here on our Earth. You know, I feel like I have some abilities in that respect, and so I feel compelled as a member of the human race to try to take my abilities and use them in a way that is useful to all of us. And plus, there's just some amazing places out there to see. And I don't know, as far as I'm concerned, you just can't help but want to go there and see them. We don't even know what we're going to see today, and it could be just another amazing day.
Well, that is all the time we have for now. Cady, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you, George. It's just nice to share this experience. I feel very fortunate to be here and be part of your team, so thanks.
For those of you following at home, mark your calendars. Next Wednesday, August 22nd, we will be chatting with Dr. Bob Ballard live at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Tuesday following that, the 28th of August, we'll be chatting with the Jason Argonauts. That'll also be live, and it'll also be at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. In the meantime, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and of course, you can always join the expedition live right here at nautiluslive.org. Now, back to Nautilus.